All right, Ryan, we are here. We are live in the ethos to the world. Good morning,
Out
sir.
there. Yep. Good morning. How are you?
Very good. I've been anticipating our conversation because for 2 weeks now, you have left us hanging. There is a story that you left us with, or you're about to leave us with a couple weeks ago, and we forgot to get to it last week. And so there's something about, it was 25 years ago. Now you're saying it's 20 or something, 20 years in the making or something like that. Do you remember what we were talking about?
Yeah, right. That was funny. It came up right at the end of the conversation, and we thought, oh, it was just funny enough. We didn't do it on purpose, but this would be a good lead out to excite people to come back next week. And then we forgot to mention it the following week. I mean, it's not a huge thing, but I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but just I think it was around, sometimes things take longer than we think to turn out. And I think it was also like, how do we know? How do we know that like right now, this conversation, it might, oh, I know, yeah, it was that whole show we talked about. This conversation today might be the best day of our life. This moment right now, what we talk about, maybe someone hears this and goes like, oh my goodness, and it just changes the whole trajectory of their life. But we don't know, right? I don't know what, that's something I'm going to post or something I'm going to say or something I'm going to do, I don't know if it's going to turn out. But anyways, yeah, and how long it takes to turn out. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, story recently was I used to work overseas. I had this amazing opportunity, and I was expatriated. I was hired by a Canadian company to work overseas in a country called Malta. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a little rock. It's a country of its own. It's one of the smallest. It's the third smallest country in Europe, and it's got like a population of maybe 300. Well, it did at the time, 300,000 people. You can drive from one end of the island to the other in over an hour. It's not that big, but it's got a super rich history. And I had no idea about the work I was doing or where I was going. Anyways, one of my assignments was to develop this business called Fly and Cruise, meaning, so I was working for the airport, and our goal was to increase, the size of the airport, the revenue of the airport, and the growth of the island. And so we had an initiative to encourage cruise ships to start their voyage in Malta, kind of like they do here in Vancouver. People fly here and go on these amazing cruises up to Alaska. If anyone, yeah, kind of knows where we are on
Yeah.
the west coast of Canada. So in Malta, that was our goal. There wasn't any ships that started there. There's these big cruise ships that would stop. All the people would come off for a few hours, buy some stuff, and then go back on the ship. But the airport, kind of missed out on that, and a lot of people would miss out on actually like staying on the island and staying overnight and enjoying it. There's a lot that people flying into Vancouver get to experience because they're flying here, not just stopping here for a couple hours. So
Mm-hmm.
that was my initiative, and we did a ton. We worked with like the whole island essentially to like orchestrate how this would work, and because there were so many people that needed to get involved. And they even developed a whole new cruise terminal to support this and passenger flows, and it was like a big deal. For 2 years, I was there helping develop this. We never got a big ship to start their journey in the time I was there, and then I still stayed with that company for a year afterwards. Still didn't get one. Anyways, long story short, I'm talking with one of my eldest daughter's good friend's dad about 2 months ago, and he just happens to mention that he was in Malta. He works in the cruise industry, and he happens to mention that he was in Malta for this grand celebration of this inaugural voyage of a ship that was starting its journey in Malta. And I was like, "Wait, what did you say?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I was there, and there's like Harry Connick Jr. like a big band and fireworks going off, and this voyage leaving, and it was like the most incredible thing I've ever seen." I'm like, "Wait, what?" And so he sent me all the pictures,
Wow.
and I was like, "Wow, that is amazing." It took 20, this was, that was 20 years ago when I lived there. And I was like, that took a lot longer than we thought, but there it is. And it looks amazing. Like it was the vision that we had, and it was my boss that had it, that gave it to me. The vision that we had just took a little longer than we thought to play out, but it did. And all of our efforts, perhaps back then, actually allowed this amazing experience to happen now. So,
This is the catalyst. Yeah. Yeah. It's like the idea that we often overestimate what we can do in a short period of time. They say like you overestimate what you can do in a year, but
Yeah.
you underestimate what you can do in 10.
Yeah.
So we definitely underestimate what we can do with a long time horizon. But so many times we look at just the short time horizon and think like, if I don't get the goal, if I don't hit the target, then I must be a failure. I haven't done enough. I'm not enough. But it's like, no, just lengthen it out a little bit. There's
Yeah.
way more we could do.
Yeah. And I think with the really strong intention and a really strong vision, and you just never know. You might start the ball rolling on something big, and it's kind of like that snowball, right? And you just don't know. I don't know. It's just a fascinating thing that sometimes we won't know, or I don't know if I would have ever, had I not chatted with him and randomly he brought that up, how would I have known that? But yeah, I don't know. I just think it's a fascinating idea that we might have all this excitement, we might have all this vision, we might have all this intention, we might get it going, and maybe it's exactly the way it was supposed to go, but we might not even ever get to see the result of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of a phrase by or as a quote by one of the developers of chiropractic, Dr. BJ Palmer. He said that you never know how far-reaching something you may say, think, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow. Like we never know. Like the thing that we do. I was listening to a podcast earlier, and this woman, I think her name is Annie Jacobson. She wrote about. She's written a bunch of books. This most recent one about nuclear war and about what happens. Like the 72. I think it was a 72 hours or something, or 72 minutes between the time of a nuclear launch and essentially the start of nuclear winter. It's horrifying. Yeah. Anyways, this story is not about nuclear war, but she was telling a story about how she was doing some press for the book, and she was in a cab, and the cab driver, her Uber driver, starts talking about how he had just lost like 300 pounds over the sometime span, and she's like, wow, she was just fascinated. She was asking him like, oh, like how did you do that? And he tells a story about how he was a security guard at. It was at a naval base or something like that. It was a security guard somewhere, and a bunch of these army people would come in, and they're like super fit, jacked dudes. And one guy one night said to him, who's like 300 pounds overweight, he said, "Hey, why don't you come to the gym with us?" And the guy's like, "Oh, okay." And so he did, and that started his journey. And it's like, you never know, like that, like, and so her point was like, be that guy to say something, to just start, like to be the catalyst, to start some sort of thing that it may end up being something amazing, but you don't know unless you take the initiative and you just start. Like they took the initiative. Malta's going to be on the map here.
Right.
Yeah, they had an intention. Then much later on, it didn't necessarily happen probably the way that they were hoping, but it happened. And along the way, many things happened.
Right? Yeah. I mean, we can't take full credit as well. Like there was so much that had to happen for that to, I don't even know what happened over the last 20 years. Yeah, it's like, and like, think of all the lives of people, that not only did it take decades, but it took after their lifetime. Like all the stuff they did wasn't even totally appreciated or even recognized in their lifetime, but had profound effect, after they were gone. I mean, you can think of so many great people. I mean, well, Jesus is obviously a big example. I mean, I know there was a huge impact while he was alive, but just look at the rippling effect even after he's gone. Like, so I go to a place of like, how do you know? Like, how do you know that the thing you're doing is the thing you're supposed to be doing? I mean, I have some thoughts, but it's an interesting conversation, I think, around how do you know, that the thing you're doing is what you're meant to be doing, that might have some profound impact on one person's life, 10 people's lives, 100 people's lives, even in your lifetime, 20 years later, a lifetime later.
Yeah. And I think on the flip side, it's also not necessarily only the things that you say, think, or do, but also the things you don't say, the things you don't think, and the things you don't do. We were talking about earlier about, just before we got on air, about presence and by being present with our kids. You were talking about being at the playground and not being the dad that's on his phone while you're pushing the kids on the swings. But think about just what that does for the kid, like you not being present in the moment. So I think a part of the formula there is, like you said, you had some thoughts about it. I think it's being intentional. I intend to have this presence to do this thing. I'm going to push this thing called life forward, as opposed to just being a participant or just to be at I guess to be at effect of my life, as opposed to being at cause in my life. So tell me about that experience yesterday, whenever that was. It was yesterday?
Yeah, last night. I guess that's a really good point, like being present with yourself. I mean, I was bringing it up, and I'll share the the concept last night, but being present with yourself to the point where you can perhaps recognize like these opportunities, like you were saying with the taxi or the Uber there, like, or with Malta or with the guy last night, like being really present to these opportunities that come up in our own life. And then there's an interesting discernment of like, yeah, this feels like a yes, like this feels like something I'm meant to be doing right now. I mean, that's what it took for me to even go to Malta. Was my mentor came to me with an opportunity, and he said, hey, do you want to go to this country you've never heard of before, do a job that you've never done before, where you'll know nobody? And I was like, yes, but like, if I wasn't present to maybe my own life, if I wasn't present to this opportunity that was being presented to me, I could have come up with all kinds of reasons, I'm sure, and excuses, and be like, no, I'm good, I'm on this path. But like, yeah, like how to be a yes, how to be present to these things that come up, how to be present to these ideas that we have, how to want to, be able to express them. And so, yeah, I think it starts with ourselves to be, like, again, just, I don't know, but I can share some, many examples where I've been present to these things that have come up and being able to be a yes to them, where they've turned out to be this incredible, change in direction in life and turned out to be amazing. And I think that's just such a practice. And, one of my coaches, Kevin, shared the other day that our especially as dads, like our life, our house here is our dojo. Like every day we get so many opportunities to practice whatever it is we want to work on, like right away, right? First thing in the morning, kids are going to bring up something, wife might bring up something. There's so many opportunities, life is, businesses. There's so many things that might get thrown back in our face that we get to, look at ourselves, practice this work. And yeah, presence is a really, really powerful one. And I think it starts with ourselves. And then, yeah, last night on the playground, and again, I'm not saying this because I'm right, this person's wrong, or this is good, this is bad. I'm just noticing that for me, it's been a real big practice since my first kid was born to be present in their lives. And that was, for me, that was from the very beginning. That meant like going to all the visits, like that meant going to the, midwives and the doctors and the ultrasounds, and like being really present with my kid's life from the very beginning, being present with the birth, being present with my wife, and it's, later on in life, there's a dad last night pushing the kid. He actually had his phone in one hand and an actual coffee cup in the other one, and he's, staring off and just pushing the kid with his phone, and then put the coffee cup down and is on his phone and then pushing the kid. And but yeah, I mean, I know you shared you have a story of this, of being the kid. I just I'm noticing that I'm just like, he's missing out on this, this kid. What I'm realizing now is my eldest is 15. Like, there is a window here that we get to spend with our kids and to be present with them. And if that's, how life's going to go with the child, I don't know, what message does it send to the child? What are we missing out on? Yeah. Anyways, there's a big part of just being present there.
Yeah, I can see. It's interesting as you're telling the story. And this is definitely something that I've developed over time, especially since having kids, is being able to see that experience from multiple vantage points. So there's lots of things happening, whereas we seem to think and we seem to live our life through this myopic view of like it's whatever is happening to me or whatever is happening for me. That's the only thing we know really. But how we project that onto other people. There's like so that dad. I mean, we don't know what he's going through. He could be just that he's out to lunch and he's super not present, and that is the way that he lives his life, and that is going to have disastrous effects later on. It could be that he's in. I mean, I know that I've had moments as a dad where I'm with my kids and thinking, how am I going to keep this together? There's so much going on. In this moment, I don't know what way is up. And I was telling you, I remembered when I was 8, I believe I was 8 years old, I broke my leg. I was tobogganing down a hill with my sister in this park, and we had just narrowly missed this one tree. My sister was sitting in front of me, and I was sitting, my little sister, so she was littler than I was, and I was sitting behind her on this toboggan. And we go barreling down this hill, and we just barely miss this one tree, and we're going straight for another tree. So my sister's right in front of me, so I don't want her to hit the tree, so I stick my leg out in front of her I'm thinking, I'm 8 years old, so I'm thinking I'm going to just kick us off or push us away from the tree. And so I barrel into this tree, and I broke my leg, twisted my ankle, sprained my ankle, and broke my leg. And I had this big cast that was above, like it went from my feet all the way to like halfway up my thigh. And I couldn't do anything for myself at that point. And one night, my dad he'd come in and was giving me a bath, like he was kind of sponge bathing me, because I couldn't do anything. And my leg is hanging out of the bath, the one that has the cast, because it can't get wet. And it was back in the day. This is way back in the day when you couldn't get casts wet. They make amazing casts now. They're pretty bomb-proof. But this plaster cast couldn't get wet. And my dad's giving me a bath. And all of a sudden, he takes the cloth that he's washing me with. And I just look at him, and he goes, and he's looking away. He's not even looking at me. He's looking off in the distance. And he goes, and he puts the cloth down, the wet cloth, on my cast. And I remember in that moment going, oh, like I'm such a burden on my family. I'm such a burden on my dad. And I carried that. I can still see that moment, like as if it was yesterday. And for so many years, I carried guilt and shame from that moment, thinking like I had done something wrong or I was wrong for what had happened. And because I looked up to my dad, I still do. He's still my hero. And it wasn't until I became a dad, I remember sitting with my kids, and then all of a sudden that moment flashed back in my mind going, oh, like I have no idea what my dad was thinking that moment. I mean, I know that he was home. He's got a kid, his oldest kid, who's supposed to be the one who kind of like helps out around the house, now can't do anything. He has got 4 kids, all under the age of 8 years old at that point. He's 29 years old at that point. And he runs a business. He's been at work all day. He was a chiropractor. He is a chiropractor. He's been at the office all day, dealing with probably 100 people that day. And who knows what was going through his mind? Like, it likely had zero to do with me. When I brought it up with him since then, I told him this story, and he's like, he doesn't remember it at all. And like, I just carried that with me, like, so for so long. And who knows, like, it may have been just a moment where he was just like super stressed, something. He might have just gotten into an argument with my mom. He might have just been super hungry. Who knows? But in the moment, like he wasn't present in that moment, or he was present to something else, not me. And from the other standpoint, like from my standpoint, I made it mean something that I didn't need to make it mean. But I was a kid. What did I know? I didn't know any different. And so similar with us now, like I look at my time with my kids, and in those, like, I don't know what my kids are going to pick up from the moments when I'm not intentional or when I'm not present. And even when I am intentional, when I am present, they may take something that I don't mean. But there's a much greater chance that they're going to make up stories that aren't true if I'm not present, as opposed to if I am present. Like there's the old saying that I think it's attributed to Wayne Gretzky, I believe, that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Right? You may miss a whole bunch if you do take them, but you'll miss all of them if you don't take them. So when we're not present, there's a way greater chance that shit's going to go sideways. May not always happen when you are present, but it'll never happen when you aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot to think about as you share that too. Like how much, it's all about the meaning we make things. Like we're just these, Thomas says this a lot too. Um, we're meaning making machines, and something potentially, like you're saying, could have been very innocent that happens like that, but then how we can make it mean so much to us, and it still happens to me and as an adult too, right? Where something just unintentional, or the other person was oblivious to it, or again they had a very different intention, but I'll make it mean something, huge, right? And not even what it was meant to be. I think about just as kids, like, and as parents, it's going to happen. We have these abilities to make things mean whatever we want. Great things. We can make it mean the best thing ever. We can make it mean the worst thing ever. I'm realizing more and more. For me, it comes back to like connection and the relationship and the communication, because ideally in a situation where if something does get turned into meaning something that it wasn't intended for, that the relationship would be there, that the kid could share it, could express it, or the parent would be so present that they would realize after, like, wait, did I say something? They would notice maybe a change in the kid. Anyways, I feel like one of the best ways to not prevent but correct or repair or just have that relationship turn into the one you want is from that place of connection, so that the kid feels safe to be like, hey, dad, this thing happened yesterday, it's still bugging me, I'd like to share it with you. Fortunately, there has been many occasions where my kids, they'll bring up stuff that I don't know if I was any different, I don't know if they would feel safe to bring it up, but they'll bring up stuff about me, they'll bring up stuff about their life, they'll ask me stuff that that historically maybe my parents would have been just a straight out no for, but they'll bring it up at least just to say, hey, like, can we have a chat about this? So I feel like it comes from that, place of presence. It comes from that place of wanting to have that kind of connection and communication, so that if things do happen that aren't what we intend, that at least there's an opportunity, I guess is what I'm saying, to bring it back onto the path that we want.
Can you give me an example of something that your kids, something that say like your parents may not have had the capacity to talk with you about, but that your kids have?
Well, there's several with my teenager, but I'm gonna need her permission to share them.
Yeah, not necessarily in
Um,
details, but maybe in concept, or in principle, or
hmm.
some topics. I guess, were there topics that say when you were growing up that were you just didn't touch with your parents, whereas you've changed that, or like you've consciously decided to change that with your kids?
Yeah, and I in you know um yeah, I'm trying to trying to think of how to make it general enough. But I mean, you could just pick any topic, whether it's the other sex, like boys, or it's alcohol, or it's parties, or it's going out late. I mean, there's many topics that are potentially sensitive. Screen time. I mean, there's so much. And I guess, just reflecting back on my own childhood, like, and I don't, I mean, I got to take responsibility too. I know I didn't know how to talk about some of the stuff that was bugging me as a kid. And I don't know, yeah, thinking back, I don't know how much of it was just I didn't know how to talk about some of this. I didn't have the like courage to bring some of it up. Maybe my parents didn't quite know how to, didn't have the tools to talk about some of the stuff, but a lot of it just didn't get talked about. And so I'm realizing now there's a lot of stuff that I want my kids to be able to talk to me about. So it's just wanting to have a different experience of this so that my kids can have the ability and the courage and the feel the safety to bring it up. And I would have you know, I can't remember who. There's a couple that had shared this with me that they want to be able to create such a relationship with their kids that their kids can bring up anything, like absolutely anything. And it's
Mm.
up to us as parents to be able to just hear it and listen to it without getting into, oh my goodness, what did you do? What did you say? How did this happen? Without making the kid feel wrong, without making them feel guilty. Because as soon as they feel it's unsafe to bring the stuff up, they won't the next time. So I just think, generally, it's a real practice to be able to have that kind of relationship. And personally, I want to, so that my kids do feel safe. That like no matter what kind of trouble they get into or whatever they did, or good or bad, that they feel like they can come to my wife and I as parents and feel safe to bring this stuff up.
Do you have any practical ways in which you've cultivated that? I'm thinking my kids are 8 and 4. So one of them is just kind of getting into that transition phase in her life where she is starting to ask a lot more questions. She is a lot more inquisitive. She has the capacity to be able to talk about stuff on maybe a deeper level, and also is starting to phase into having things that are uncomfortable for her or uncomfortable for us to go through. So I don't necessarily have the experience of like, well, yeah, this is what I did to do that. I want to do that too. So do you have any practical tools or anything that you've kind of consciously done that has allowed that to begin or to flourish, to unfold?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but yeah, it wasn't always like this. I can remember back to not being able to be like this. I think what works now, I don't necessarily, yeah, it's one of the things I haven't thought about what happens, but first of all, I think it just comes from that place of like unconditional love. Like this is our kid, and they're not intending to do anything wrong here, or anyways, it comes from that the first and foremost, like their kid, unconditional love, and then I think the biggest superpower I start with is like curiosity. So
Mm.
rather than, concern or condemn or criticize or jump to some other conclusion, like I don't like making assumptions. So largely when something comes up, it's easy to very quickly go to a place of like, oh, this is why, or what did you do, but I do my best to stay wide open, to stay curious, to just want to understand. For me, that creates connection, is that curiosity, because now I'm asking really good questions and I'm really curious about what's going on in their world and how did this come about. And yeah, it's being wildly curious, it's being present, it's being available. There has been times when our kids are, our eldest is called at, super late at night to come get picked up. Or something's happened with someone that, they got themselves into a little bit of trouble, and it's not making it wrong, I guess, is one of the big
Mhm.
things too, right? Is just it's happened, let's deal with it, let's talk about it. Even at even at the youngest age, it's not trying to turn it into a lesson when the thing is happening as well. Like, because that's when I'm reactive. That's when they might be active. If my youngest is having a meltdown, that's not the time to try and like teach her a lesson. It's
Mm.
let's get out of the situation safely, calmly. I'm here to support. I'm available. I'm present. You can call me anytime. And then, okay, once everyone's good, let's talk about it. What happened? Why did this happen? Do you want it to not happen again? Yeah, I think those are the things that I can think of that I use to make sure that I don't know, my kids feel really open and safe to be able to call me, come to me. I'm present. I'm curious. I'm available. I'm not trying to make
Yeah.
anyone wrong.
I think it's a great uh, principle, that idea of the delay between stimulus and response. I was just listening to a little bit yesterday with Dr. Peter Attia, and he talks about one of the biggest things that he did to help himself, as he used to deal with like massive anger issues and would just be like rageful and super angry. And something that one of his, I believe is one of his counselors or one of his therapists or coaches told him was, say if you want to do something, you want to write that angry email, or you want to call someone an asshole, or you want to do something that just out of impulse, is you set a timer. So you're the trigger said, okay, you can do that thing, but it's going to be in an hour. And he said most of the time, he's like, when I followed that, he's like, I was only, I only did it but half the time. But when I did do it, when that time ran out, I didn't have the same feeling anymore. I didn't have and clearly I didn't have the regret of having done the stupid thing to get back at the person or be angry or rageful. And I think I was like, oh, that's such a simple but powerful thing. And I think that's so great when it's with your kids. In that moment, you just want to be like, why did you do that? And try to discipline them and know that like the positive intention is I want to teach them so that they'll be safe and that they won't do something stupid and they'll learn something. But in that moment, yeah, it's very hard to learn when we have so much emotion and just the chaos of the moment is when we're wrapped up in it. So okay, this is not the time to do that. Let's make sure they're okay and then wait a little bit. And once our heads have cooled a little bit, so that the separating stimulus and response. And I think that applies once they can see that in how we parent, they then can unconsciously and then also potentially consciously apply that to every area of their life. I think that's a great thing.
Right. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, as well as just being the example or giving them that experience of what that's like to take that pause. I know that that's been super helpful just in the relationship with my wife too. Is sometimes, things will get heated, is being able to take that pause. We've worked with someone, years back who had that suggestion, and whether it's with ourselves, whether it's with someone else, our wife, whether it's with our kids, that power, that pause is powerful. And sometimes it's only going to be a few moments, if you're just in a conversation. Sometimes, like you're saying, it might be an hour, but just being able to take that pause and to breathe. I know that's one practice that I'd shared before too, around when we're triggered as well ourselves, is inserting that pause and being able to, the 3-step formula was to notice it, like notice the emotion that's coming up, like notice the state that we're in, name it, because that helps to just be like, okay, that's what it is. It's not like this thing out there. It's like, no, I'm frustrated right now. I'm hungry right now. I'm whatever it is. Like notice and name what's going on, and then be like, okay, like being present with it. Kind of the theme of what we're talking about here. Like accept it. Like this is here right now. I might not be able to like change it right away because it might be a big thing for me, but at least, okay, I've taken a breath. I've noticed that I'm hangry, and okay, that's that. Let me accept that right now. I'm not in a place where I'm going to get food. Now, at least, I have a much better way of perhaps handling the situation that's going on outside of me. Mm-hmm. But that pause is super, super powerful for sure.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, that acceptance is so key. Also, like so many times we feel something, or something's happening, say with my kids, and we just want it to be different. Like it should be different. But just knowing that, well, this is what it is. And let's say you might be somebody listening might be thinking, yeah, like I want to be like this. I feel like I fucked it up for so long. Like how do I change it? How do I do something different? Well, I believe the first step is really, like you're saying, being aware that, okay, this is what it is. This is what it is. And then also accepting this is what it is. I cannot change what happened, but I can change things moving forward. And that's knowing this is where it's at. And that's okay. And we often feel stuck. It reminded me of some things that Tony Robbins taught me about this idea of conscious blaming. You familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
So this idea that I may feel like I do things now, or I think a certain way, or I act a certain way because that's the way that my dad did it to me, or that's the way my mom acted with me, and we come into these things having a story that I'm just a victim of my childhood. I'm like this because of my childhood, this really shitty childhood, or this really easy childhood, and that's why I quit all the time now, or that's why I have this, or that's why this. And so we blame our parents, we blame our upbringing for all these things that why we can't do. Yet there are people that have used those same things that have overcome those odds and have become totally different. So it's like Tony talks about, I mean, he's the GOAT at transformation, at strategy, at like he's the GOAT at all this stuff. He created an entire industry out of this because of what he learned from Jim Rohn and other people. But he talks about his mom, and his mom was an alcoholic. She was abusive. He had 7 stepfathers. And he said, he's like, I've got all the reasons in the world to not be who I am. He's like, but if my mom was the mom that I needed when I felt like I needed that, I would not be the man I am today. And so it's because of those things that we become who we are if we choose. So either we are the victims of our circumstance, or we are the victors inside of that. And to know that life is not something that just happens to us, but it's happening for us if we choose. So going back to what we're talking about just being present, if we can just be present into the moment, and like you were just saying, just being aware and just accepting, okay, here's where I'm at. Now what do I want to do? And taking that distance from the stimulus, then our response can be, okay, it can be a little bit different because I'm not so wrapped up in this chaos of the moment. And, I think about the story with my dad, when my dad put that wet cloth on my plaster cast. I made it mean something, but it wasn't, it likely wasn't that. It likely wasn't what happened was what I thought happened. Something else was going on. And so I get to choose now what that was. And I have so much more compassion for that moment. I can only imagine what my dad was going through. And, it's often until we're put into a situation where we can reflect and go, oh, wow, like things are actually different. We can have compassion for other people because we don't know. Someone might be hangry. Somebody might have just lost a loved one. Somebody might be going through a moment where they don't feel like their life matters at all. And that's why they act like an asshole. But we don't know. So either we can be the people who are at cause of something intentional and good for another person, or we can just add fuel to that fire.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. Like back to that story in the playground, I could choose to be all wrapped up now in this other dad's story, or what he's not doing, or what, judging him or whatever, and then I've taken myself out of the game, where I'm now not present with my own kid if I get too wrapped up in somebody else now. And you're right, I can't, I'd be making assumptions about what's going on. You're right, he might be going through some really big deal that he needs to get done right now at that moment. He's not ever like that normally. Yeah, I think it's huge not to make assumptions. I think it's huge to be present. Yeah, just what, and all, I mean, really at the end of the day, we only can take responsibility for our own personal experience, right? Like I can't, I'm not going to go over there and tell that person how they should be. My responsibility is how I show up. I mean, that I have full control over. My state, my emotions, my presence. And I mean, like you're saying before too, like that's the gift that we want to give our kids so that we can be that example for them, so that when they grow up, they're like, yeah, this is just how, this is how it is as a parent. This is how my parents were. This is how I'm going to be. I think that presence, cheesy as it sounds, that presence becomes a gift for the other person as well as us.
Yeah. And I think it's just even remembering that in all moments that we are just all doing our best. that everybody is just doing the best. And it may be shitty. I know it's sometimes I think, well, I'm not doing my best. Yeah, but in that moment, I was doing my best with what I had available. It was drastically decreased capacity of what I know I'm capable of. But I think just that word keeps coming back to me, acceptance. Like if it could have been different, it would have been. So the way it worked out was exactly the way it should have worked out because that's the way it worked out. If it could have been different, it would have been different.
Yeah.
But that's it. And so, and then I think, now what? Now what?
Yeah, being empowered with the choice to be in the present moment and now, how do you choose to be? Like there's a lot of suffering in the gap, like you're saying, like it's all with acceptance, it's like really being present to what is right now. And there can be, and I know I've experienced this and I still do, there can be a lot of suffering in the gap between what I think it should be and what it is, and there's a lot of suffering if you focus too much on, oh, what happened versus what you wish would have happened or what you want in the future, but if that's why, well, again, what we keep talking about, presence, Eckhart Tolle, the power of now. Like there's so many great teachers and mentors that talk about like how powerful, like truly being in the moment is. Because if we're spreading our thoughts and our energy and all this other stuff everywhere else in terms of, I wish this moment would be different. I wish it should be like this, or my life should have turned out like this, or my future, I wish it should be like this. If we're thinking about all these other things and we're not focused on the moment, then what are, we're totally, in my opinion, I'm missing out on what actually is, which is this moment, right? I mean, that's all that exists, right? Like it's already done. If I'm too focused on the past, like it's done. I can't change it. And if I'm too focused on the future, I'm not actually living my life right now. I mean, for me, the beauty is last night, it's sunny out. We're at the playground. She's wanting to have a competition with me on the swings about how high we can go. And then we're on the beach and, we didn't bring anything. We just went out after dinner and she wants to go swimming. And, there's all kinds of stuff I could have made up around, oh no, it's too late. Or, oh no, we don't have towels. We don't have a change of clothes. But I'm just like, I'm present to, she's a kid. It's a beautiful night. We'll figure it out. It's not the end of the world. I let her know that, hey, you might be cold. She's like, I'm fine. Okay, you're going to be wet. There's going to be sand in the car. And she's like, Dad, it's fine. Okay, go for it. And just being present to that moment right then, that she gets to be a kid. She's out there swimming in the ocean. It's not exactly super warm, but sun setting. I mean, to me, that's it. Like, there's nothing else, and I'm there. I'm not thinking about. Well, I'm sure I drifted off and thought about a couple of things along the journey there too. But mostly, I'm able to be present to what she wants, what's really important, and that moment right then.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about how many times where my instinct is be like, no, like it seems like a lot of work. Like with my kids, they want to do something. Oh, it just seems like a lot of work. But then going, oh, fuck it. What are we talking about? What are we doing? We have this moment. Like, let's do it. Let's go for it. Like last night, we had a very different moment, but similar in that my kids wanted to go fly their kites. We just got them these kites, and they wanted to go to the field at the elementary school across the street to go fly these kites after dinner. And it was hot, and I know they'd been outside all day, and there was like hardly any wind, and we're like, you know what? Like it did make a lot of sense to go do it, but I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. And we had so much fun, and kids learned lots of stuff, and they just had a blast. If anything, for me, it was a moment like I'll remember that moment because I'll just remember my oldest daughter just running down this field, like carrying this or pulling this kite, and her looking up and like in amazement, like wow, it was just so cool. And I think I rob myself so much of those moments because of I want to sanitize things, or I want to make things less chaotic or not difficult, or what are other people going to think, or whatever it is. And it's those moments where I just say, oh, fuck it, be present. Let's do this. There's those magic moments that happen because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, what I hear in there is just that switch between like all these thoughts about me, like I was thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have to carry you, or you're gonna get cold, and then the car's gonna get dirty. Like all those thoughts are just that's all about me, and they're not really that big a deal. But then when you focus on the other, like from that place, like no, that's all gonna be fine. And then I'm present to what the other person really wants here, and I'm like, oh, like I get to be of service here, like I get to support this. That might be a huge memory for her, or maybe not. But the point is, someone's showing up in front of me with something that they really want, and if I really just took a moment and paused and be like, what's the bigger deal here? Like my daughter's happiness, this joy, this experience, out, we're out here at night, or my car getting a little dirty. Like what's really
Mhm.
important here? And if I can take a moment, if I can be present to that, usually I think I make the decision to, support in this case what my kid really wants and is really excited about, and it's not that big a deal in the end.
Yeah, it reminds me of something we talked about. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but the idea that the things that we want, if we run them through these three kind of filters or three questions, it determines whether or not we should do it. Like, well, number one is, does it feel good? So that thing with your daughter last night going to go swimming, you're like, yeah, it feels great. Like you want to have this great experience. So in the moment, it feels great. Number two is it good for you? But in that moment, for you, for both of you, great moment to bond. It was great for her. It's a healthy activity, and great. And is it good for everybody? Like it's great for the both of you. It could be a great experience for your family. It could be a great experience of just showing anybody that was around to see that this carefree kind of fun, frolicking, like that's great. On the other hand, let's say what she really wanted in that moment, she really, really wanted a big bag of cotton candy. She really, really wanted it. That's a totally different experience. Totally feels great in the moment. Is it good for her? It's terrible for her. And is it good for anybody else? No, it's not, because you know that the consequence absolutely or almost absolutely is some sugar crash and some massive meltdown later on because of it. And never mind, it's also terrible for her body and terrible for it's terrible. So in that instance, it's like, well, yeah, you're not always going to give your kid what they want, because that's not good for them. Really not good for them. But this moment, yeah, it's great. Let's go for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna remember those three because I do cave on treats too, though, quite often. So I
Oh, I do too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do too.
even for myself, but because it's a balance of like I was telling someone about like my talking about Peter Attia there. I was telling someone about my longevity routine that I really got inspired when I read his book. And so I created this routine that I love doing every week that's helping me, I think, stay really fit. And they're like, "Do you ever eat anything junky?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Like I once in a while, yeah. I mean, maybe more than I should. I do like to, as Tony calls it, zag, right? Like have those days where, yeah, sure, there's a lot of zig, like, okay, yeah, boom, on routine, straight and good habits and everything like that. And then, but allowing myself to zag, and I think for myself, this and for my kids too, right? It's not about eating broccoli all the time. And sometimes it zags a little too much and then needs to come
Hmm.
back. I mean, I know I haven't totally figured that out. There's sometimes more zagging than there is zigging, but
Oh
I
yeah,
do
me too,
know that,
for
yeah,
sure.
for myself and my kids, it's important to allow a little bit of zag and not have it be all, you know,
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's the dance, right? it's it's I find it so fascinating when it comes to things with my kids that I will not, or I'll let up on something. Like I'll give in, I'll make an exception. Okay, we're gonna have some treat here, not because I think it's really good for them, but because I actually wanted something.
yeah,
So, okay, but when I'm okay, it's like no, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna do that. I'm not gonna allow them that. So yeah, so much of what we think of is for them. Actually, no, it's we're thinking about our own selves.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've done that for sure. Yeah, maybe like 2 days ago, probably.
Yeah, man, we are these weird creatures. Weird creatures.
Yeah, yeah. I think, in that, I think it's important to just let our kids know that we haven't, I'm just reflecting back, like we don't have it all figured out. Like I don't, it's impossible to have it all figured out. Like there's just so many facets to life. I mean, I just get I just think about when you go in the library, like there's so many books, there's so much knowledge, there's so many things to learn. I do think, I mean, I think it's important, yes, to let ourselves know, to let our kids know that we've got the essentials figured out here, but there's also a lot that we haven't, and letting them know that, like, even your dad's still making mistakes. Even your dad, sometimes eats a little bit too many treats. Like, I'm still figuring these things out so that they can realize that, like, there is like a realness to that. There is like, oh yeah, okay, like I don't have to feel bad if I haven't figured everything out yet, because even my dad and my mom, they're still figuring things out too. I think there's a real humanness to letting them know that, like, I don't have it all figured out all the time.
And I think part of it too, it's something I'll share that I think has been great for us. Something I did with my daughter, because also we don't have things figured out, but also the things we have figured out is because we made the same mistakes that they're making, and we don't want them to make those mistakes potentially. And so humanizing ourselves in sharing that, when I was a kid, oh yeah, I made those mistakes. Something that I've done in the recent past, what we're doing now, we're coming across with my older daughter that she has a lot, like she just feels so deeply, and she can have a point where I feel like she could have a little bit more resilience. Like she takes things too personally, or she gets just far too hurt on something that seems like little, but it really, really affect her. So I'm like, okay, I want to teach her about coming back from adversity or coming back from a challenge when you've made a mistake, and it's okay to lose and it's okay to fail, and it's all part of the process. So one game that we started playing at night. So when we do our story time, usually I would read them a story. Over the last little bit, some nights we've done it 5 or 6 times. I'll tell them a story. I'll say, okay, I'm going to tell you a story, and you have to tell me at the end of the story whether it's true or whether it's make believe. And each time I've told a story about something that I did when I was a kid or when I was a teenager, where something went horribly wrong, or I made a giant mistake, or something broke. I broke something, or something happened that or it's something that to teach them, like, it's okay. Like, I messed up. I learned from it, and it's okay. I can laugh at these things. And I found, like, it's definitely been helping my daughter, because, like, she'll ask questions about it after. So I'll tell a story, and they'll say, "Oh, that's not true." Like the last story I told them last night, we went on a canoe trip when I was a teenager, and when we were doing this portage, and when we were packing up to go, I put all the stuff in my canoe and then went to go help somebody else get their stuff, and my canoe floated off into down into the lake, and so we had to go and get it. When I went to get it, I got back on the canoe in the middle of the lake, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I flipped the canoe. All my stuff fell out. Everything was soaking wet, and I had 5 hours before I could have any chance of having something dry by the time we got back to the car. So the idea was, I made this mistake, but I had to deal with it, and it was super uncomfortable, and I really felt bad in the moment because I got everybody else's stuff wet, but it was okay. Like, no big deal. Like, we survived. And after I told the story, they're like, it's not true. It's not true. I'm like, it is true. And a couple minutes later, after we're on to something else, my daughter, my oldest, she said, like, was everybody mad at you for doing that? And I said, no. I said, I was kind of mad at myself for doing it. I felt really silly for having done that. It was kind of a mistake that I made, but no, nobody was mad. Everybody understood. And she's like, oh, okay. Like, and I could tell it wasn't this explicit, direct, here's the lesson, this is what's happening. But I could tell, like, there was something different going on in her brain. Like, oh, she's asking questions. She's putting it through her own filters. Like, she's learning things. And I was like, oh, like, there's something big about teaching our kids, just not what, here's the path, here's the right thing, but also here's how I came to that. And I also messed up too. I mess up. Yeah. I'm telling you, like, when we can say, yes, we've made mistakes, and this is how I learned. It allows them I believe it allows them the possibility for them to know that they can learn from their mistakes, that there's a difference between their behavior and their character. There's a difference between what they do and who they are. And who they are is perfect, and who they are is amazing, and who they are, because that's how I was. When I was a kid, my mom and dad thought the same things about me. I'm perfect just the way I am. I mess up sometimes too, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad person because I did a bad thing. And how many times I've heard kids, and have heard from other parents, and have heard, thankfully we haven't had this yet with our kid, and hopefully it never does happen. But kids would be like, "I'm such a bad person. Like I'm terrible," and like, whoa, 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 whoa. And like once a kid gets that in their mind, like that is so irrational, but that's what they believe. And to undo that, oh man, like that's a slippery slope. And I think now, like, man, that stuff, I remember I carried this story about my dad from when I was 8 years old. I'm 46 years old. It wasn't until I was 43 that I undid that story. It was like, man, like, whew.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I feel like that's, on the journey of your own self-discovery, on your own self-awareness, you can draw these lessons from your own life, right? Like even back to what you were saying at the very beginning around effective blaming. But that comes with self-awareness, right? That comes with that willingness, the desire to actually dig into our own past, realize the lessons from it for ourselves, grow from that, and then what a gift that is to be able to share it with other people, especially your kids, because now it's just that much more real, right? It's not someone else's story out there. No, this is your dad's own story. You know who I am now, right here, and this is what happened to me. This is what I learned from my own past. These are the mistakes I made. And I think it's much easier for, say, your daughter in this case to put herself in your shoes and learn experientially, right? Because she's now able to consider, oh yeah, well, what if that happened to me? It happened to my dad. I think that's fantastic, where you're helping her kind of go through that scenario and talking through some of the things that she's thinking about. But I think it all comes from that willingness to dig into our own stuff and our own past and draw those lessons out, and then yeah, that's a great desire to want to teach it to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think about I remember a story one of my mentors, Gilles Lamarche, told me. He said, he gave this little anecdote. He said, a self-realized man walks into a room, and he walks into this big ballroom, and he's wearing an old sweatshirt and a tattered old pair of sweatpants. And he walks into this big ballroom, and there's 200 people in there, and they're all wearing, they're all in tuxes and gowns. And he says, and the question is, well, what does the man do? How does he feel? He's a self-realized man. And his answer was, he feels nothing. Like he doesn't notice, because he just is who he is. Mm. And he's comfortable in himself. He doesn't notice that, oh, yeah, because it doesn't matter. I think that's so, for us too, it's, when we're inside, when we are just who we are, like it doesn't matter what happens on the outside. It's all what happens. It's all about what happens on the inside, and what we can take and what we can learn. And I think what you said before was so brilliant. Just having just that awareness and acceptance is so key, so key.
Yeah, it's simple. It's not always easy. But I've found for my own self, so powerful to be able to take that. But it all starts from that pause. It all starts from that, just in the moment, the taking a simple breath to be like, okay, what's going on here? And then deciding what to do from there. Like, yeah, and not getting right into the trigger, or right into the reactiveness of it. But yeah, powerful pause, notice it, name it, accept it. And then from there, at least you have a much better chance of responding, truly in the best way that we can, not from a place of, upsetness or fight or flight or whatever might have been going on initially.
Yeah. Yeah. This is certainly a lesson I need to learn too right now. It's funny that, so many times I think I shared with you the other day, like I posted something online about there's a post I made about this concept of high intention, low attachment. So walking into a moment, walking into an experience, and really having the intention to what is my intention? I want to help transform someone's life, or whatever it is, but not being attached to the outcome of what happens. And so many times, I wrote that essentially for myself because I was feeling like in the moment, I was feeling so attached to the outcome of something. And I was so I ruminated about it. I just thought about it constantly all day long. I was thinking about this thing that I really had no control over. Yet I was allowing my own emotions, my own presence to be hijacked because of this thing that I can't control. And I find so many times, like the things that we want to, I just want to live that, but I don't, and that's okay. Like I gotta remember, like it's okay. Like even Tony Robbins has moments where he doesn't feel in control of his life. Even people like Oprah, who have everything in the world, have many moments where they don't feel like they're enough, or they're not doing enough, they're not being present. And it's okay. It's okay. Like sometimes the things that we talk about, the things that we teach, the things that we think, that's the things that we need to learn the most. And we're all just on this journey. And yeah, just you stop, you become aware. Okay, this is what is happening. Name it. This is what I'm feeling. Okay, this is it. This is what it is. It is what it is. And then I feel like the next, it's like the thing that comes after that is what makes or breaks it. It's like, what now?
Right.
Now I'm in this moment. I'm aware of what's happened. I've named it. This is what's happening. Now what?
Yeah.
And that's where all the power is.
Agreed. Yeah, you're right. In that, being able to get to that point, I feel like gives you, it feels empowering to me, because now at least you have a better chance at, deciding what you want to do. Like you have choice. You have, that feels empowering. You can decide, okay, I actually want this to go differently. But if you're just reacting, then there's not a lot of empowerment, and you're letting, some patterns run you, or some bias run you, or some, yeah. Today I do have another call right after this one. So we get to end right when very close to when we said we would. So really appreciate you, man, and our time here, and
you too, brother,
who's listening. Hopefully there's some great nuggets, some wisdom, some conversation that stirs some, I realize just with this, even just chatting with you, there's so much that gets stirred up to me that I didn't realize or hadn't thought about or get to share. So thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you too. Same for me. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going to have a good day now. I will be at the cause of my day, not at the effect today.
Bang on. Yes. All right, brother.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right. Yeah. Take care.